Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry? Boxes? Yes, I'll get some. Good morning. On behalf of Mrs. Juliette, Gloria, Buitron Miller, and the Miller family, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I know it means a lot to the family for your prayers and your support and just your presence here with them this morning. Our service will begin here in a few minutes with Mr. Matthew Pettis. Before it does, I'd like to ask if you can please check your cell phones one more time. Make sure they're either off or on silent. As to not to disturb the service this morning, and also out of respect for the Miller family. Again, thank you so much for being here with us. Mr. Pettis.
Let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we humbly and boldly come before your throne of grace just to thank you for your constant love, mercy, forgiveness, and your care. We come before you needing your strength, needing your wisdom, but also see the blessing of family and those who are here. Mrs. Miller lived a great life, and we honor that. We thank you so much for watching over this family and caring for us and awakening our hearts and our conscience, Father. For you're a God who cares for us deeply, a God who cherishes us more so, and a God who would do anything for us. And so we praise you, we love you, and we're thankful. It's in Christ, Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, we're here today because of our shared care and affection for Julie, or I say Mrs. Miller to me, right? Because today is a day for family. The New Testament author reminds us several times over to rejoice with those who rejoice, but also to weep with those who weep. And I love those words. When something good is going on in your life, I want to be part of that. When you feel like you're on top of the world, let's rejoice together. But he says with those who are also weeping. So on the flip side, when you feel like you're in the valley or at the bottom, and all of a sudden sadness or sorrow is plaguing your mind, I want to be there also. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and to weep with those who weep. Those words by Paul are poetic, which is just a unique way to describe intimacy, right? It's a great way just to describe family, weeping with those who weep. Let's face it, that shows a little bit of vulnerability. We don't always like that. Those words are Paul describing, that's heartfelt emotion, weeping with those who weep. And guess what? That's okay. Because this morning we're blessed to be surrounded with loved ones, because today is a day for family. When I got the call from Aunt Bobby, she left a voicemail saying, "Matthew, this is your Aunt Bobby, call me back." And I called her back, the same day, score. And I was just saying, what an honor it is to speak. But more so, what an honor just to be here. And I used to remember saying, wow, 98 years old. That's a full life. 98 years old. How do you sum up or put into words 98 years? I mean, you have thousands of memories, countless stories, all moments that were captured between intervals of laughter and joy and speckled enough episodes of sorrow and sometimes just life. But today we remember. We remember her care. We remember her passion, her devotion, the joy she had for adventure and travel, the mood to get in the kitchen and cook, and how she could stick her head into just a good book and read and read. Romance novels for the win. This is perhaps a little silly, but I always just remember her eyeglasses and just those chains that always hung from her. To me, that was Mrs. Miller. That was my picture, the vivid picture I had of her. But I remember more than that. This is a lady who would babysit Josh and I when we were in diapers, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, coming from pre-K at Concordia. I remember her washing and drying my clothes after a day of playing outside in her backyard in the rain and mud as Josh and I pretended to be masters of the universe. This was a lady who nursed my black eye after Josh and I wrestled and he put me into the shoulder of a couch. This was a lady with the heart and warmth of a nurse who aided my mom and dad when I was running a high fever because a doctor said I had pneumonia at 5 months old. She was there. She did all this for me, and Mrs. Miller wasn't even my grandma. I can't even imagine how much more love she had for her family, for her kids, and for her grandkids. But I remember, because today is a day of remembrance. The psalmist writes, "Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom." This day is just more than just family and remembrance. It's also a day of perspective. When the psalmist writes, "Teach us to number our days," this isn't about busting out the old calculator and grabbing pen and paper and calculating, okay, I have X amount of years left in my life, because that would be weird and probably a little morbid. Rather, the psalmist, he's imploring his audience. He's asking the reader, consider each day and realize what an incredible gift our time on this earth really is. In other words, each moment counts. Every day is a blessing. In the last 6 years, I've lost 3 grandparents. I sat there feeling like it was this dream. It felt so surreal, or you may say unearthly, because you see this death's permanent. But at the same time, death causes us to put things into proper perspective, right? It gives us some time and just for a moment to reflect on our lives and to refocus on things that truly matter. Family and faith. Death reminds us, hey, we're not in control as day-to-day life is filled with uncertainty, unpredictability. And we quickly see that life and death, it doesn't play by our rules and our time, what we think to happen. But it's moments like these where you can ask, where am I? Where do I want to be? How would she have me live? So Grandma's Julie's day brings us perspective. Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Even in our grief and our tears, I can just feel the love in this room. And you can see it. You can see the encouragement. You can see the feeling, the care, all these things coming from such a great woman, but the care it has for this family right here. And so we sit here thankful for the time that we had with Grandma Julie, for the roles that she played in all of our lives. And that's a blessing that no one can ever take away. So as today continues, hug your family tight. Remember the beauty of Grandma Julie and make the days count. For what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, or the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him.
I don't know whose little girl that is. It's causing some problems. Sorry about that. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank all those, both that came from far and near, for taking the time to be here today. As Matt said, today is the day that we celebrate and give so much thanks for the wonderful and amazing Juliette, Gloria, Miller. As we take a look around this very room and listen to the stories shared, it's so easy to see how much of a blessing she was on all of our lives. She wants to be up here with Daddy. Nana was 98 years old. She was born in 1923. The same year the Yankee Stadium was built and Babe Ruth led them to their first world championship. Al Capone was running the streets of Chicago, and the infamous Hollywood sign was built in the Santa Monica Mountains of Los Angeles. To the younger crowd here today, sorry to say, Fortnite did not exist yet. When you stop and think about it all, is when you realize how incredibly fast time flies. Seems like just yesterday, I was dodging flying chanclas coming from Nana's direction. Not sure why, but I think it's safe to say that it was probably well-deserved. As I look around this room, I feel a mixed bag of emotions. And honestly, I'm not sure who I feel worse for. All those here that know, undoubtedly aware of how amazing of a woman we lost, or if I should feel worse for those that didn't get the absolute honor and pleasure of knowing her well enough to be here. Because I think we can all agree that Nana was so special. And she was so fancy. Obviously, I see all the leopard print. Hobby's tie. It's just perfect. She was fancy in her own types of art, like the mural she painted on our formal dining room wall. I've never seen anything like that before. She was always the funniest and extravagantly dressed person in the room, but it worked for her, and she became known for her style. Nana was kind and forgiving, and she had a radiant faith in Jesus Christ and Christianity. She was relentless in her pursuit of truth and virtue, and while none of us are perfect or sinless in this life, she may come as close as it gets. As Nana's final days were coming to an end, I had the opportunity to meet with her and say a formal goodbye. I can say it was one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced. I told her there would be a day when we were together again, free of pain and suffering. And I told her that no matter what it took, that I'd find her again. This is supposed to be from my wife. Yeah, and I simply thanked her for always making me feel significant. She was there for me in my most challenging of times. When I struggled in school, she told me I was a genius. She lied. I had felt so dumb and defeated, but she always built me back up. When I felt alone or scared or uncertain, she would always be there to listen and offer her advice. Either that or she fed me. She was always feeding people. I can barely think of her in her old house on Dresden without seeing her frying up some gorditas. That or some sort of fruit hot cake. And it didn't matter if you wanted some, or even if you liked them. By God, you were getting some. And no one dared waste the food from a lady that rationed out her glasses of milk. Truthfully, Nana and I had some wonderful conversations over banana pancakes. I'd sit and listen to her wealth of knowledge. She loved history, and I enjoyed her telling the same stories of ancient Greece or Babylonian times over and over again. But mostly we just talked and shared life stories. Most of her stories were of her 4 children. She shared how stylish and tech-savvy Uncle Rodney was. Hot Rod, as he was known. He was always so cool and accommodating, a true entertainer. She loved to talk about Uncle Ron and his physique, his beautiful blonde hair and movie star charm. She loved to show us fantastic art. She was so proud of that. And Aunt Bobby, her beautiful face, still, and strong character. She was so smart and wonderful and warm-hearted. An amazing cook as well, just like her mama. Is there someone else? And we would talk about my dad, Roland, this incredible man that he became against all odds. How he picked up and traveled the world, all for love. And he has shown me how to be a man in this world. Looking back to those conversations, I can't help but feel incredibly blessed to have you all. I see parts of Nana in all of you. I think how wonderful it would be for you to be able to walk out of here today knowing that others see those qualities in you too. You see, Nana wasn't just my grandma by fate. She was at times my best friend. Always there for me when I needed it the most, and she was always my home. In our final moments together, we held hands. I couldn't help to think of how warm and soft her hands were. She always had such beautiful hands. I thought of all the life and experience that has passed through her hand, and I broke down. She stayed strong. She squeezed my hand, and she told me how much she loved me, and to always keep Jesus in my heart, and to take care of my beautiful family. Even at her most challenging of times, she was a best friend to me. And I will always remember the warmth of her hand, which now warms my soul. Thank you.
I'm Steve Butron. Juliette, and Julie, as I have a hard time calling her Juliette, and Julie, as I always knew her since I was a child, was my dad's sister. And I thought I had printed my words in a big enough font that I could read them without my glasses, but nope. Aunt Julie was a fixture in my life growing up. She was part of my life just as far back as I can remember. I spent my childhood at her house growing up and playing with my 4 cousins, Ron, Roland, Bobby, Roberta, and Rodney. Through elementary school, I was either over at my Aunt Julie's house or I was at home bugging my parents to take me over there. Her house on Arnold Street was a great place to be a kid. Had a large front yard, was on a corner lot, had a yard on the side of the house, which we of course called the side yard, and a garage. There were willow trees near the side yard, and during storms, we'd often climb up in their high branches and would ride them as they swayed in gusts of wind. Behind the garage, there was an old children's playhouse made of concrete or concrete masonry, and behind that there was an alley, which was where my cousins had their pet cemetery. We all had wonderful adventures in and around that house. There were plenty of places to play in private and get into mischief, which we did our share of. During those times, I remember passing through the dining room while playing with my cousins. My parents and my Aunt Julie would all be sitting around the kitchen table talking. And I remember thinking more than once when I was a child how dull and boring it must be to be an adult most of the time. We were having so much fun, and the adults were just sitting there and talking. And as I've gotten older, I realize now how right I was. Finally, just before my freshman year in high school, my parents bought a house just a couple of streets over from Aunt Julie's. By that time, she had moved her family to the last house she'd owned over on Dresden, and I was a very happy camper to be so close to my cousins. Those years I lived there were the best part of my childhood, and I'll always remember them fondly. My Aunt Julie was the oldest amongst three siblings. As the previous speakers have indicated, she survived to the age of 98, and most of the time she enjoyed good health. She had been a single parent long before it was as common as it is today. And as it is with so many other things in life, there's much about my Aunt Julie that I didn't appreciate and understand as a child. And then, even as I got older, I took for granted. Only as an adult can I begin to understand how difficult it must have been for her to raise 4 children on her own. As youngsters, we joked about how frugal she was. Harsh toilet paper and deodorant that smelled like Elmer's glue. But I think that we all grew up to understand that she had to cut corners to make ends meet. But her kids always had a roof over their head. They were always well-dressed and clean. They lived in houses that she purchased on her own. They attended religious services regularly, and she took them on family vacations. She was a registered nurse, and as a professional healthcare provider, she worked very hard, many times long night shifts. She was the only one amongst her siblings to earn a professional education, and she had a long and productive career. In terms of her medical training, Aunt Julie was a very generous resource for the whole family, including extended family, and she would often provide medical advice and, in many instances, inoculations and treatment of cut and bruises for her kids as well as other family members. Although I have to confess, in my older age, I do remember that sometimes when we did get inoculations, she shared needles amongst the kids, but we all obviously survived. My Aunt Julie loved cooking, and she was very good at it. She made wonderful, simple dishes, but she also made some very elaborate ones and spent a great deal of time and effort on them. As eating out was a rarity, all of her kids learned their way around a kitchen at very young ages. And due to her work schedule, they often had to prepare their own meals when they were young. I remember one of their favorites and mine were hot dog tacos. The wiener was stuck on a metal fork and cooked over an open flame on a gas stove, but they were delicious. My Aunt Julie also loved history. She loved learning and read probably hundreds, if not thousands, of historical novels, I put that in quotes, and other books. When she shared her knowledge of history, which she did very often, she did so with the passion of someone who clearly loved the subject, and her knowledge was very genuine and deep. She could talk about that subject for hours. She was also a very talented artist, and her homes, and more recently, her room that she lived in at her son Rodney's house, were filled with her paintings, as well as the work of other artists she appreciated. She was a very strong person, physically and emotionally. She worked hard at her demanding profession and in maintaining her home. And she was also very strong emotionally. Part of that, I think, came from the nature of her work as a nurse, but I think much of it also came to her naturally. As an adult with her work and responsibilities at home, she had to know that she couldn't afford to fall apart. She never had the luxury of giving up and letting someone else take over. There was no one else. She did it all. She worked at the hospital and at home. She and her kids were active in their faith, and they enjoyed rich relationships with her family, and she enjoyed rich relationships with her family and many friends. She emotionally and sometimes financially supported and encouraged her children as they grew to adults with their educations, their careers, and relationships. She was fortunate to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren and was able to spend a lot of time with them. Though her body finally failed, she enjoyed the gift of mental acuity until the end. She recognized, spoke, engaged with, and was able to hold many of those she loved until the very end. Though she's no longer with us in a physical sense, fond memories of her are deeply and indelibly inscribed on the hearts of her family and countless friends. And in that important sense, she will continue to live on.
Hi, I'm Holly. I am Ron Miller's daughter and Grandma Julie's first grandbaby. I wrote this on Facebook, so some of you guys probably already saw it, but it's my tribute to Grandma. I posted pictures of her, and they were my favorite pictures. In 3 of them, she was dancing on a dance floor at a party or a wedding. I said, these are my favorite photos of Grandma. In 3 pics, Grandma's dancing at weddings or in a house party in her 80s and 90s. I've admired her for many reasons. She loved get-togethers and spending time with people. She loved reading about history and sharing her knowledge. She traveled to Spain in her early 70s. She had a career as a nurse while raising 4 children on her own. I grew up knowing I could be a mom and have a career because of her amazing example. Some of my best childhood memories were spending summers at Grandma's house in San Antonio on Dresden, even though I grew up in Washington State. I would sit outside with her while she watered her lawn barefoot and listen to the cicadas and look for fireflies. That was really magical since we didn't have those sights or sounds in the Pacific Northwest. She always had a perfectly manicured lawn and a unique style of decor and clothing all her own. She'd wear big flashy jewelry, animal print, and red lipstick. She'd smile and do a little strut when we told her how pretty she looked. I'm positive that my strength, independence, and my love for travel comes from my grandma. She was a lovely example of a life well lived. I've always known I'd strive to be that cool as I grow old. I love you, Grandma. I'm happy you're at peace. I don't know if you guys know this, but Grandma wrote a booklet. In 2016, I asked her to write down some of her own history because she loved history. I printed a few copies of these for some of my family today, and I'm happy to share them with you as well. If you want to give me your email address, I'll send you an electronic copy. You guys will probably need it because the font came out really small at the printing company. So if I'm reading like this, it's because I need my glasses too. But I was able to see Grandma and say goodbye to her in person as well. I was going to give everyone her book, and that I was going to read some from it. I have to warn you, when you get this book, Grandma's old school. She didn't sugarcoat stuff, so there are some things that may be considered slurs. I don't know if the word peons is slurs, but she says that a lot and in her history. And she also talks about when people look like Orientals. I don't know. I don't think we use that word anymore, but I wanted to read a little bit from this. She talked about her mom told her most of this stuff, and her mom talked about the first day that she met her dad. So Grandma Julie's mother and father, they were sweethearts for 11 years. She said, my father's name was Jesus Butron Olvera. His father was Basque, married to Maria Olvera from San Diego, Texas, a Spanish lady from Spain, whose family arrived to the coast of Texas with a Spanish land grant. The Butrons also had a land grant. The reason the Butrons moved to Monterey was because of my grandmother's sister, Helena Butron Martinez. Martinez was the last name of grandfather's mother, who was married to George Warden, a British doctor from England. What an English doctor was doing in Monterey, I don't know. He and Helena Butron had 2 sons and 1 daughter. My grandfather had walked off of his land. Evidently, he wasn't a farmer or a rancher. They may have been shepherders because of their speech, The Butrons were Basque from a town by San Sebastian, Spain, near the Bay of Biscay. My great-aunt Helena Warden felt sorry for my grandfather. He had 11 children and was very poor. Ignacio Butron Martinez married Maria Olvera from San Diego, where they met and they were married. I couldn't find out. Those that know are dead. They lived many years in Laredo. They had 11 children: Otilla, the oldest, Jose, Antonio, Jesus, Maria, Nacho, Arturo, Justo, Roberto, Jorge, and Ada. Otilla married late and had one child. Antonio was very handsome. He became an actor. He never married. He had many lovers, so he died of syphilis. Yeah. I'm just reading her words. Jose married a woman from Laredo named Dominga and had 6 children: Jorge, Maria, Lloyd, Rodolfo, Felix, and Magdalena. Nacho moved to Mexico City and married a girl from there. They had 2 sons and 1 daughter. Felix married a girl from Laredo, moved to Austin, and had 2 sons. My father and mother married in 1921 after 11 years of courtship. They were married in the city of Monterey, where mother lived. My father had left Monterey in his 20s and had gone to Laredo to become an apprentice to a house painter. He became a contractor with time, and he worked for Palmer's and Sons for many years. He did almost all the painting for the original Solo Serve, which is really cool and fitting because if you guys know, Grandma dragged us grandkids to Solo Serve, which seemed like hours and hours. It probably was. Also, her father in 1929 did some of the painting for the original Majestic Theater. That's really cool. Their first home was on Bellevue Street, where other friends from Mexico lived. In this area were also large colonies of Italians. The Italians came to our neighborhood with a truck full of fresh vegetables, and all the housewives used to come out to buy them. My father and mother had 4 children. The first child, born in 1922, was a boy. It was stillborn. The second child was me, Juliette Gloria, born July 7, 1923. On January 4th, 1925, a boy was born, Adolfo Rolando. And November 11th, 1929, Maria Velia was born. I was the only child born in Monterey. My father had a contract, and I was born while my parents were on that trip. I had my ears pierced when I was only 3 days old. When I typed this book out for Grandma, I also decided to interview her and ask her some questions of things I would want to remember about her and that I could pass on to my children. So this is in this book as well as about 20 questions that she answered for me. And when I told her the last time I saw her that I was going to read this at her funeral, she was happy and she was glad that her legacy could live on through this print. And she said, I love that you asked me these questions, and you need to make this a tradition to have your kids do it for you, and so on. I would suggest that all of you do that. Question number 1, did your parents ever share their memories with you about the day that you were born? She said, one early Saturday morning while working on a painting contract in Monterey, my father had to wait for my birth before he could go hunting. Do you know why they named you Juliette Gloria? Pancha's favorite cousin was like a sister to her. Her father was grandfather's brother, Leopoldo. He had 3 daughters. Juliette was his favorite, so he named me after her. What's your earliest childhood memory? A rocking chair with a huge doll as tall as I was. Did you have any pets? Cats. I always had cats. My favorite one was white and fluffy, named Snowball. Father stepped on him once and nearly killed him. What were your favorite games and hobbies? What did you do for fun? Reading, skating, and dancing. What was your favorite thing about school, and what was your least favorite? What were your friends like? Her most favorite was history. Her least favorite was math. At recess with her friends, she would play jacks. She was also closer to her cousins than her friends, though. What did you want to be when you grow up? A nurse. I knew when I met a nurse who moved into my mother's rented apartment, that's what I wanted to be. Who were your heroes or role models when you were young? people from Westerns, Jane Grey and Louis Lemaine. What big world events were the most memorable while you were growing up? The Depression and World War II. Where did you go to college? How old were you? San Antonio College, Incarnate Word. Nursing school was at Santa Rosa School of Nursing. She graduated in 1928. What was your first job, and what was your favorite job? Surgical nurse at Santa Rosa Hospital. Her favorite was that she enlisted in the Navy, but the war ended shortly after. How old were you when your parents passed away? My father was 54. I was 28. My mother was 56. I was 30. How did you meet your spouse? I was working at a blood bank, and he came to donate. Where did you go on your first date? An expensive restaurant. How old were you when you got engaged or got married? I was engaged at 34 and married at 35. What was the wedding like? We eloped to Chicago and were married in a small town at the Justice of the Peace on August 6, 1956. Why did you choose your children's names? Robert's brother was Ronald William. My brother was Roland. I named my daughter after Robert, and Rodney just because I wanted all our names. What's your favorite book, movie, or song? Her favorite movie was Gone with the Wind, and her book, La Mayagina. What life advice would you pass along to your grandchildren? Never stop gaining knowledge. What has been your toughest life experience? Marriage. What is the one thing you most want people to remember about you? My love of God, family, the Bible, history, art, travel, and cooking. If you guys want to give me your email address, I'll send you this full book. I'll be happy to. I'll collect them. Before we close, was there anyone else that wanted to speak? Okay. You do? Come on.
It's kind of high. Hello, everybody. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but every time I'd walk in and say, "Hi, Juliette," she'd say, "Is that you, Slato?" Give you a little background. Me and Bobby moved into the same neighborhood at 12 years old, and we were both being raised by Mexican single mothers. We both had Anglo-Saxon fathers. We seemed to have a lot in common, and then we found out that our mothers actually went to junior high school together. And I remember your mom's when yeah, they were in the same neighborhood. But my mom dropped out after her like 9th grade or something like that to become a dancer. But anyway, I remember before we could go skating, her mom always said, "You got to clean the house, you got to clean the kitchen, you got to feed the boys." So she would be in the kitchen, I'd be vacuuming the living room, and before we could go skating. So but we always made it to the skating rink. More recently, it was just over a year ago, we were at Bobby's old house, and she would ask me the same question over and over. "Do you have a boyfriend?" And I said, "Yes, I do." "Well, where'd you find him?" I said, "I found him online. They have like a catalog. You just kind of keep swiping and swiping." And I said, "I just picked him." She says, "Well, do you think there'd be one for me?" I said, "We can certainly look if you want to." No, but I loved her very much. I wore red today in her honor, and the fur, of course, which I never wear. So it was a good opportunity. But I just want to say that I really loved her a lot, and she was a great lady. That's it.
Anyone else? Yeah? Okay.
I'm not going to do this.
Okay, there is going to be a reception after this, and everyone is welcome. It's at Rodney's house. The address is 8102 Bowwood, Bough, Bowwood. If you need to write it down, what do you say? Oh, after 2. Okay, after 2. So if you guys need the address, you can ask, Roland, Bobby, myself for the actual address. To close out this memorial service, we have a 12-minute slideshow. So if you guys can just wait till they cue that up, that's going to be playing soon. Thank you.
Close your eyes, let me tell you all the reasons why. Think you're one of a kind.